They were America's first dream. 115 men, women, and children vanished without a trace. They left behind no bodies, no signs of a struggle. They left only a single word, carved into a tree. And for 400 years, that one word has been history's most haunting clue. This is the story of the Lost Colony of Roanoke, and the single word that has stumped history for centuries. Our story begins in the late 16th century, a time of immense ambition and global rivalry. England's Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, watched with a mix of envy and apprehension as her rival, King Philip II of Spain, grew fabulously wealthy from the spoils of the New World. England needed a foothold in North America, a base for privateering against Spanish treasure fleets, and a source of its own newfound riches. It was a geopolitical chess match played across an ocean, and the pawns were real people, filled with hopes for a better life. The first attempts at establishing a colony on Roanoke Island, a small strip of land off the coast of modern-day North Carolina, were fraught with difficulty, led by Sir Walter Raleigh's expeditions. These early all-male ventures were plagued by poor planning, dwindling supplies, and hostile relations with some of the local indigenous tribes. They were military outposts, not true settlements, and they failed. But in 1587, a new kind of expedition set sail. This wasn't just soldiers and explorers. This time, there were families. 115 men, women, and children, led by Governor John White, an artist and cartographer who had been on the previous voyages. They were farmers, craftsmen, and laborers, seeking not just fortune, but a permanent home. They were planting the seeds of a new English nation. Their journey was difficult from the start. The ship's pilot, Simon Fernandez, stubbornly refused to take them to their intended destination on the Chesapeake Bay, a more sheltered and fertile area. Instead, he dropped them at the site of the previous failed settlement on Roanoke Island. It was a bad omen. Despite the rocky start, the colonists began to build. They repaired the old fort and cottages, and tried to re-establish relationships with the local tribes, like the CROATOAN people on a nearby island, who seemed friendly. Life was hard, but there was a powerful symbol of hope. On August 18, 1587, Governor White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Virginia. Virginia Dare was the first English child born in the New World. She represented the future, the very embodiment of their American dream. But as the summer wore on, their supplies, which were meant for a settlement on the Chesapeake, began to run dangerously low. The colonists knew they would not survive the winter without help. A difficult decision was made. Governor John White, despite his reluctance to leave his family, his daughter, and his newborn granddaughter, would sail back to England to secure provisions and reinforcements. He promised to return as quickly as possible, by the following spring at the latest. Before he left, they agreed on a secret sign. If the colonists had to leave Roanoke for any reason, they would carve their destination into a prominent tree or post. If they were in distress, they were to carve a Maltese cross above the name. With that grim understanding, White set sail, watching the small settlement fade into the horizon, never imagining it would be the last time he would see any of them. John White arrived in England to find a nation in crisis. King Philip II of Spain, furious at English privateering and Protestant defiance, had amassed the Invincibly Armada, a massive fleet of warships poised to invade England. Every available English ship Every sailor, every resource was commandeered for the war effort. White's pleas for a relief mission to Roanoke were lost in the patriotic fervor and the desperate preparations for war. He was trapped. His planned swift return turned into a nightmare of delay. 1 year passed, then 2. The Spanish Armada was famously defeated in 1588, but the war with Spain dragged on, and finding a ship for a private colonial venture remained nearly impossible. For 3 agonizing years, John White was stuck in England, tormented by thoughts of his colony, his daughter, and his granddaughter, Virginia. What was happening to them? Were they starving? Were they safe? He tried multiple times to arrange passage, only to be thwarted by pirates, storms, and bureaucracy. Finally, in 1590, White managed to secure passage on a privateering expedition that agreed, reluctantly, to stop at Roanoke on its way to the Caribbean. As they approached the island on August 8, Virginia, Dare's 3rd birthday, White's heart must have been pounding with a mix of hope and dread. From the ship, he saw a column of smoke rising from the island, a signal. Were they waiting for him? As his landing party rowed ashore, an eerie silence greeted them. The smoke was from a simple forest fire, not a settlement. They made their way to the place where he had left 115 souls. It was gone. The entire settlement had been dismantled. The houses were taken down, not burned or destroyed, but carefully disassembled. The defensive palisade, a sturdy wall of logs that encircled the village, was still standing, strong and intact. There were no signs of a battle, no skeletons, no graves, no evidence of a struggle or a panicked departure. It was as if the colony had simply evaporated. White and his men searched the now empty and overgrown site, calling out names into the silent woods. Then, they saw it. Carved into one of the main posts of the palisade was a single, cryptic word, CROATOAN. Searching further, they found the letters CROW carved into another nearby tree. White's mind raced back to their prearranged signal. He looked for the sign of distress, the Maltese cross that was to be carved if they had been forced to leave. It wasn't there. The absence of the cross was as significant as the presence of the word. It suggested they had left willingly. So, what does it mean? This is where the investigation truly begins. The primary and most widely accepted theory is that of assimilation. CROATOAN was not just a random word. It was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island. And it was also the name of the friendly indigenous tribe that lived there, led by a chief named Manteo. Manteo had traveled to England with earlier expeditions, learned English, and had been a crucial ally to the colonists. The message seemed clear: we have gone to live with the CROATOAN people. The lack of a distress signal further supports this. With their supplies gone and their governor long overdue, it makes perfect sense that the colonists would seek refuge with their known allies, a people who knew how to survive in this new land. Later accounts from the early 17th century seem to bolster this theory. English explorers at the Jamestown settlement founded a few years later heard stories from local tribes about people living to the south who looked like them, who had 2-story houses made of stone, and who could read from a book. There have even been claims of descendants of the Powhatan tribe with gray eyes and light hair, traits not typically found in the indigenous population. Archaeological digs on Hatteras Island have uncovered late 16th century English pottery and other artifacts mixed in with Native American items, suggesting a shared living space. It points not to a vanishing, but to a merging of 2 cultures. The lost colony wasn't lost, it was absorbed. But if the answer is so simple, why is it still a mystery? As his ship prepared to sail south to find his family, a powerful storm blew in. The ship's anchor cable broke, and with the hurricane season approaching, the ship's captain refused to risk his vessel further. He turned the ship around and sailed for the Caribbean, and then back to England. John White, heartbroken and defeated, would never return to America. No official English search party ever went to CROATOAN to confirm the theory. Our best lead was never followed up. Of course, other theories have persisted over the centuries. The most dramatic is the massacre theory. Perhaps the colonists were attacked and wiped out by a hostile tribe. Some point to the powerful Powhatan Confederacy to the north, or perhaps a local tribe that had been wronged by the earlier, more aggressive English expeditions. However, this theory crumbles under the lack of evidence. There would have been bodies, signs of a fight, and the settlement would likely have been burned to the ground. Instead, the houses were carefully taken down, and the defensive wall was left standing. It doesn't fit the scene. There are other, more fringe theories as well. Unlikely for a group containing so many women and children. Was there a devastating disease that wiped them out? Possible, but it doesn't explain the dismantled houses or the carved message. And then there are the wilder ideas, involving everything from cannibalism to supernatural intervention, but these lack any shred of historical or archaeological evidence. So, where does that leave us? The most logical, evidence-based conclusion is that the colonists of Roanoke, facing starvation, assimilated with their CROATOAN allies. They became part of a new, blended community. The story of the lost colony may not be one of a mysterious disappearance, but rather one of survival and adaptation. But because John White was forced to turn back, because no one ever went to CROATOAN to bring back definitive proof, we can never be 100% certain. There are no definitive records, no letters, no Virginia Dare grown up to tell her tale. And so, the carving on that post remains. A single word that is both a clue and a tantalizing question mark. The fate of those 115 men, women, and children remains America's oldest unsolved mystery. A haunting ghost story written into the first chapter of its history. They were the first dream, and their silent disappearance ensures they will never be forgotten. Thank you so much for joining us on this historical investigation. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.